Hey, this is Jeff Pilson of Foreigner, Dokken, Dio, you name it. I was in it. And you're listening to the whole podcast, My Fave.
Welcome to the Hall. I am Rob Sprans.
I'm Lori Levine.
And we are joined by Jeff Pilson, who I think is the hardest working man in show business. Jeff, for those of you who don't know, he's currently in Foreigner. He was with Dokken for the longest time, one of my favorite bands back in the day. He's been with Dio. I mean, we're going to go through all of it. Jeff, thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Well, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, as someone who grew up on music and loved music, you must be pinching yourself to be able to play with Foreigner. I mean, that just really has to be an awesome experience.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I was a big fan before I joined the band. I love the music, love the recordings, and being in the band. If anything, it's even better. The fans are great. It's just a wonderful gig. I love the people. I love the fans. I love the music. What's not to love?
So true. And it's probably one of those that when you try to learn the songs, you kind of know them already. It's like, I know this change is coming, even though I don't know what it is.
Sure. No, I played Foreigner songs in cover bands.
So now that you're on tour with Foreigner, the tour is starting soon. You guys can go to foreigner.com and get all of the tour dates. I was so curious as to how you guys how you wound up working with them. Did you have to audition for Mick? I mean, is it the point where you've been in so many different projects and you produced, so that you're pretty well known to begin with? Like, how did that go down?
Well, the way it worked is I was in a movie that came out in 2001. Actually came out December 9th, 2001. So not a great day for a movie to come out, because 2 days later we know what happened. Right. Anyway, but in the movie with me was Jason Bonham. Mm-hmm. And Jason, son of the legendary Led Zeppelin drummer, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, Jason in 2004, Jason started working with Mick Jones, and they weren't really sure exactly at first whether it was going to be a Mick Jones solo project or what, but I think Jason kind of pushed him into revamping Foreigner. So anyways, it started off with, we did a charity event, and they called me up and they said, hey, would you want to play this charity event? And I was like, of course, so we got together, and the chemistry was just immediate. And I think that kind of helped spark Mick on to think, wow, yeah, this is fun. I do want to revamp Foreigner. So he did, and we got Kelly Hansen the following summer, and there you go, off and running.
Yeah, Kelly Hansen, by the way. I mean, talk about having big shoes to fill. Now, I saw Foreigner in its later days, and it wasn't that long ago. I think Mick did a reunion tour of it, and it was with Lou. But you could tell, when you have a voice that's that good, unfortunately, age is going to get you. And I know Lou had his issues and everything else as far as health, which also doesn't help. But, Steve Perry would be the first one to tell you it's great to have a great voice, but as you get older, it's so hard to hit that.
Very true.
Here comes Kelly, who sounds so, he has a bit of himself in there, of course.
Yeah.
But you watch these gigs, man, he sounds phenomenal. And so it's like, you can close your eyes and it's the same. It's funny.
Yeah, and it is funny because you're right. He actually does sound like himself, but he just sounds so natural doing the Foreigner stuff that it really, really works. And he's copped the phrasing, and I think he's really captured a lot of what Lou did that the fans really gravitated towards. And I think that's really worked well. And the fact is he does that every single night, and he's been doing it for the last 17 years. So, I mean, that's not an easy task.
No, it certainly isn't. And, it's funny because his story, I'm actually jumping here. Let's get to Steel Dragon for a minute. But, the movie Rockstar, which you were in, and I kind of want to get into a little bit about how much influence you had on other things about the film, being part of someone who lived through that life in a lot of ways. It's funny because at the time that story was based on Judas Priest, right? Because there was a
Originally, yes.
yeah. So there was someone who sang in a cover band. I forgot his name, but he
Rip
sang it.
Owens. Rip
Yeah,
Owens.
Rip
Team
Owens.
Rip Owens.
Yeah. So and then they brought him in to sing. Since then, however, Journey has done it by finding a singer basically on YouTube, and this kid sounds fantastic. Kelly has been around for a very long time. It wasn't like he was an unknown, but Kelly,
he was not a YouTube discovery or anything like that.
He certainly wasn't. But it is the kind of that life, and in a weird way, you got to do that. You got to be part of Foreigner and kind of experience what that was like. Now, in the movie itself, other than being in it and being part of Still Dragging, did you have any influence on it? Like, did you just get to play the part in the film and that was it? And the music wise, I know that there's different people writing different songs. How much of an influence did you have aside from that?
Well, actually, the director, Stephen Herrick, was really, really cool. And frequently he would actually say to us, like, well, okay, what would have really gone down in this situation? What would have really happened? And we'd kind of explain to him, and he would try and incorporate that into whatever we were doing in the scene. You have your limits. It is Hollywood, and you do want to tell a story and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, he really tried to defer to us when it came to making it more real. I mean, that was the whole idea of getting real musicians in the band, is make it real. And, it was a real band. So, we kind of did have influence in a very interesting collaborative way. It was cool.
Yeah. I mean, because I was going to ask you, what do you think the movie got right about that time? And what do you think the movie, I wouldn't say got wrong, but made just made way more overdone than it really was.
Right. Well, that's what movies do, right?
Of course.
What did they get right? Well, they got right kind of the attitude behind a lot of it. There was that. They got the excitement of the era. They did capture that, and I thought that was great. They captured some of the silliness, and then some of the kind of tragic stuff that goes on behind the scenes too. They kind of got that too. What did they get? They did, and yeah, I don't think they got anything wrong. They just exaggerated certain things for movie purposes that probably are a little unrealistic, but not as much as most of those movies. I mean, it was closer than any other rock music movie I've seen. I mean, Almost Famous was great, but even that was a little bit fantasy-ish or a little bit beyond the pale in some spots. Plus, I think Rockstar was supposed to be just fun. Almost Famous was telling another story. But all in all, I think they did an amazing job. I really do.
I agree. I think it's a very underrated film, and it's one of those that every time it's on, I watch it. And maybe it's because I grew up, on the other side. I grew up in the seats. I saw Dokken open for Judas Priest at Nassau Coliseum on the Turbo Tour, like so long ago, and it kind of just showed us what we hoped was happening, and maybe it's not just that, but we hoped that's what was going on. We hoped there were orgies backstage. That's what we wanted. I'm sure touring now is way different for you than it was back then, though.
Oh boy, yeah. But I mean, and there was exaggeration. You didn't really wake up in a room full of naked, beautiful women, but
you're ruining it. No, I'm just kidding.
I said a room full.
Oh, okay.
Just like six or seven.
Yeah, I mean, we kept it reasonable.
So I do actually want to go back now. Firstly, your start. How do you go from music lover to music player? What makes you want to become a musician and not just someone who just enjoys music and just wants to listen to it? Because that is a big step to say, you know what, I want to learn how to do this myself.
By the way, I'm apologizing right up front. We didn't even land in Tulsa till like 3 a.m. So I just woke up recently, so I'm having to make coffee. So you don't mind if I make coffee while we're talking, do you?
No, I like watching this.
I feel like
A little Keurig there.
Yes, for those just listening to audio, Jeff has a Keurig all set up. He's ready to go.
I am, and I'm popping it in there. So I'm sorry. The question was.
Well, this answers the question. What's the difference between touring now and back then?
Yeah, he's alone making
Ben
coffee.
Yeah, but that is a big one. Like, what's the differences there?
Right, and those are, and that's true. I mean, basically, we're really about the music now. So right now I'm doing this because, I know what I need to function. And which is coffee, of course, but it's about taking care of yourself. It's all about the show now. Everything we do is related to what's going to make a great show. And well, I hope the people watching this thing haven't been drinking because they're going to get a little dizzy. But
you know what? This is just going to be a 2-minute clip. Jeff Pilson makes a Keurig coffee. That's going to be
very nice. Can I get a Keurig endorsement now?
You know what? We'll call them.
We'll take it too.
Yeah,
for sure. But it's a very good point because Jeff, you also have a great voice and you're singing a lot as well. So you have to take care of yourself. You
really do. It's between exercise, getting the right sleep. Like I say, I even on the road, I very rarely don't get to bed till. I mean, I rarely stay up till 4 or 4:30, which I think I did last night. Mm-hmm. We had a very, very late flight, but it was worth it because here we are in Tulsa, and now I can do this.
Yeah, very cool. So the question before it was what made you want to start playing and be a musician and get into bands? I know you grew up in Illinois first, right?
Well, I was born in Illinois, but I grew up in Wisconsin, really.
Wisconsin, yeah.
Well, basically, honestly, I started playing the cello when I was 11. So I had an attraction to music. Then when I was 12, I was in 6th grade. I remember this clear as a bell. I was on the schoolyard one day, and I was singing this local beer commercial with a friend of mine. And these guys came up and they said, "Hey, man, we're starting a band." These are fellow 6th graders. We're starting a band and we need a singer. You want to sing? I was like, sure. And then they said, and we don't have a bass player. You want to play bass? Sure. So, and I had a paper out at the time. So I went out and spent $35 on a Tiesco Del Rey bass and $35 on a Gibson Skylark amp. And I was off and running.
What was the name of that band?
Yeah.
That band never materialized. But the ironic thing is, I moved away from there a year later, but I'm still friends with those guys to this day. And I just got a text like 3 days ago from one of the guys that actually wanted me to do the band.
That's so cool.
52 years ago.
You threw a reunion?
Yeah. Well, we actually joked about that.
So you wound up moving to California. Was this the reason why you did it? Was to try to, I hate to use a cliche, but to try to make it, to see if you can make it in music? So that's the way you went. So you went to San Fran first, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So then at what point, because music now and the way music gets exposed to people is night and day beyond belief. So first of all, anyone can you can grab your coffee if it's ready.
It's not ready.
He knows his way around the current.
First of all, you can be discovered just by posting something online. That was never the case back then. Like you had to play and have a following and have someone actually show up and know that you had a following, and all of that had to go into it. And that's the first thing. And secondly, to record anything, you'd have to spend money. You'd have to go to a studio, have somebody actually, record it and produce it and spend tons of money. And you were stuck with whatever came out of it when it was done. So when the time comes now where, when you look back on that, what do you think was, when you started doing shows with Dokken, what do you think was the catalyst that got you noticed?
I think we had a unique sound. Don's voice was very unique, and George's guitar playing, was very, very ear catching. I mean, people noticed George right away. I noticed George, as soon as I got in the band, I was like, whoa, this guy's really good. And I think it was that and songs, we definitely had a clue about songwriting, and I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that got forgotten after a while was just the choruses in song. Like especially the first 4 albums are so iconic and known in the metal world, but the choruses were very catchy. Like, it's pop, but it's the same time it's not. And it's not just one track on an album. Like, every single one does. And when I listen to Lynch Pilson, and I listen to what you do, End Machine, and like, that still to this day, like that chorus structure, and even your voice has some similarities to it too. Like, it's almost takes you back to it, but with a new twist to it.
Oh, well, thank you. That's kind of what we want to do. Well, I mean, we believe, especially George and I. Well, Don as well. We just believe in strong songs. I mean, it's all about songs. You can have the greatest players and the greatest singers in the world, and if it isn't a great song, who cares?
Yeah, it's true. So when you so Tooth and Nail is how long is it out before Alone Again actually hits and puts you just in a different hemisphere, so to speak? When that album hits, it's out there, but I think the second Alone Again, because back then in order for a band to break mainstream in the beginning, it was the ballad. They always went after the ballad.
Yeah.
That was the one. Okay, we need one ballad so we can release something. So do you realize that song's special as you're writing it? When does it happen that you're like, wow, wait a second, we're actually starting to really get attention now?
All right. Well, number one, when we wrote it, Don pretty much had the whole chorus. I'm alone again without you. He had that. And when I heard that, I thought, that's great. That is really strong. And then we carved the rest of it. I think he had most of the lyrics because he had a version of the song. So he had a bulk of it already done. And it was great. And so I personally felt, yes, this is really strong. As we were recording it, I felt, honestly, at the time, I felt like we didn't quite achieve what we could have with the song, but I felt strong about it. But it was actually the third song off the record, and I don't think George and Mick particularly felt all that strong about it, and I know that our management didn't feel all that strong about it. Don had to, well, I guess Don and I both, but especially Don had to really force management basically into releasing it as a single, which is funny when you think back on it now, but management were more into heavier stuff anyways, which was cool. And that was a big part of our development, but yeah, I personally felt it was strong. So it was very gratified when it did hit. But it was the third single. So I believe the record came out in, I want to say September or October, I think. I think something like that. And I don't think Alone Again hit. I think we did the video, and I don't think the video came out till like April or May.
Oh,
so
wow.
it took a long time.
Yeah, no, I think Just Got Lucky came out first, right? Was that
Into the Fire was first.
Oh, Into the Fire. That's right. Okay. Yeah. So, so it's once that hit, I mean, now you're in Billboard. So what starts to change for you? Does anything change as far as, you start playing bigger places? Do you get treated different? What changes in your life once that, because now you're known, like the band is known and you got songs out.
Well, the thing you have to realize is at the time, our friends, Motley and Rat and everything, they seemed way bigger. Mm-hmm. So at the time, it didn't feel like it changed much, to be honest with you. It felt like we kept our nose to the grindstone, though. We were very focused because we did want to be successful. But it didn't feel like we had gotten there yet. I didn't really feel any real solid feeling of success for another couple of years. So yes, we were getting respect. We were getting on really good tours, but we were on this upward trajectory that was very slow. but it was slow, but it was steady. So, which I don't even know if that exists today, but,
Right.
but no, it didn't feel, it certainly didn't feel like, oh, okay, now we've made it. Not that at all. It was, like I say, we just felt like we always got to do more. Which I think kept our standards high.
That's a good point. Yeah, it pushes you to do more.
Right.
And I know there was always, the word was always going around at the time that you guys were going to do your own headliner tour. Like it was coming. Like Back for the Attack came out, which is my favorite of the batch. But look, they're all really good. But Back for the Attack was my favorite, and I played it to death. And that's the one I saw you guys live with. But then the next step was supposed to be, Dokken's going to be doing a headlining tour soon. People don't always know when the friction begins behind the scenes. Was there already trouble at that point? Like, there was already. So that's
that was there from the beginning. The biggest problem is that towards the beginning of the Back for the Attack tour, we were out with Aerosmith, and we had gone platinum in 3 weeks. We were out with Aerosmith. And Back for the Attack actually went platinum before Permanent Vacation, the Aerosmith. Wow. So the tour was just smoking. I mean, every show was completely sold out, and it was totally full when we went on. It was a great period of time for us. And unfortunately, it was on Halloween night of that year that Don decides to break it that he wants to quit the band.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a mind blow, and Don had his reasons. I mean, I don't agree with a lot of them, but he had reasons. But what happened was the morale just went to hell after that, and George in particular reacted very, very strongly. It really blew his mind that this was happening. So we had to deal with the next several months of having that cloud hanging over us, and it was not pretty. So the friction was very, very there. But that's not the reason we didn't do a headline tour for Back to the Attack. The reason we didn't do that is because we did the Monsters of Rock that summer.
Yes. I remember that too.
And that was like we were supposedly going to be making the same kind of money that we would have headlining, but with this stadium tour with all these other bands, it was going to be great. So that's why we didn't do that. But then, of course, we broke up after that.
Yeah. So I guess, what was the reasoning that he gave? Was it just that he couldn't take the fighting that you guys had? Because you said you weren't crazy about the excuse or the reasoning.
Well, I didn't agree with all of it.
What was
most of it was he felt the thing that he felt was, and it kind of started, the song Walk Away that's on Beast from the East.
Sure do.
Well, we had actually written a version. There was a ballad kind of written for Back for the Attack. And if you notice, Back for the Attack doesn't have a ballad on it. Yep. And we had started writing basically the beginnings of what was Walk Away. But it didn't make the record because it didn't get really finished. And that really upset Don. He felt like we didn't put enough effort into it, even though it wasn't even just his song, but he just felt like there wasn't enough an effort put into it, which is why, by the way, later on, I ended up revisiting that and kind of putting together a basic demo idea, which became Walk Away with George. Mm-hmm. And that was partly our way of trying to make it better. But yeah, he just felt that. And honestly, I think he thought he would be able to get the name and just continue on as Dokken without us. And then, of course, on a business side, that would have been, you know, unfortunately, we had signed fortunately for us, but we had signed a partnership agreement, which didn't allow anybody to do that. So that's why that turned into such a fiasco. So, I mean, I understand him wanting to leave on some levels. There was a bit of a 3-against-1 mentality going on. But at the same time, I think there was greed involved as well that really made him want to do that. And that was the unfortunate part.
Yeah. And especially because, this is when you have a band that's named after one person.
Yeah.
It doesn't, in the case of you guys, it didn't really even make sense because you really were very collaborative. You all had a huge part in it. You
Right.
can't, and between you, George, Mick, all of you, I couldn't picture it any other way.
Right.
It wouldn't have worked in any other way. But it's funny that you mentioned that you signed this partnership agreement and everything else. It's so fortuitous that you did, but at the time when you have an option to do a record, I would just be signing everything. Like, just the fact that it was in there to protect you was actually a great thing to have.
That was a separate agreement. Actually, I got to give George the credit for that. He was the one that was like, no, we got to make sure we have this thing, but because he always thought if the band is called Dokken, the guy is going to probably try and run away with it himself, Right. So he suspected that, and that was smart on his part. So we were protected, and that was good. We deserved to be. But no, you're right. We were lucky because the royalty rates back then were not as good, and there was a lot of questionable stuff going on.
Yeah. So then you and you see that you can see like over time, you guys did try to bring it back together or do something or patch it up, but it always just seems to go right back to where it was. Yeah. And I guess that's the thing when you're practically kids, you get into this agreement. It's almost a marriage in its own way. And then here you are all of these years later, you're not all the same people anymore, and those grudges hold. But it's not like you didn't go to some other great stuff. You got to play with the legendary Ronnie James Dio.
Did.
Yeah. So how did that come about? Did you have to audition for him? Did you know another guy who knew a guy again? I mean, at this point, why have Jeff audition?
All right. Well. So basically, Vinny Appice was one of my dearest friends. Anyways, he had played in my War and Peace band for a while, and we're just really close. And I was also really close to Ronnie at that point. We were good friends. And by the way, Ronnie and Vinny and I all lived very close to each other at the time. We're talking early 90s. And, I would go, Friday nights, Ronnie would go out to Indian food, and so we were friends. So what happened was so this would have been early 93. I was sitting at home one day. And at this point I had been working with Don and we had pretty much written what ended up becoming the Dysfunctional record that came out later. But it didn't look like it was going to be a Dokken reunion at that point. So I was kind of sitting on the fence about it. But anyways, one day I'm sitting at home and my door knocks, and I go to the door and it's Ronnie and Vinny. I'm like, hey guys, what are you doing here? And he goes, well, Jimmy Bain, the late Jimmy Bain, whom I love dearly, may he rest in peace. Love Jimmy, but it's known that he had some problems back then. And so Ronnie and Vinny said, well, Jimmy hasn't been showing for the last few days. We need to find a bass player. Do you know anybody that could do it? And I said, yeah, me. And they said, well, that's what we were hoping you'd say, but okay. I said, well, we've got this place down the street where we're set up to play. And it literally was down the street. They said, can you go jam? I said, well, yeah, but my sprinklers aren't working and I can't. And they were like, we'll get it. Okay. And mind you, Vinny Appice is one of the most handy guys you'll ever meet in your life.
Really?
So Vinny and Ronnie go in my backyard and my pool stuff and everything. And in about 5 minutes, they've got my sprinklers working somehow. So like,
Ronnie Dio system. That's so great. That's so great. It's right. I got it. So you wind up going on tour with Dio. I mean, the guy was such a sweet human. It really seemed that in so many ways, they always say, the good die young, but in the case of Ronnie, no one had a negative thing to say about the guy. And when the news came out that he was sick, I remember Wendy, I think, broke it to everybody, and it was just really tough. He was just a very talented guy. It's so great that you got to not only play with him, but work on sprinkler systems with him. That's pretty impressive.
Well, he was a dear friend. He really was. I mean, he was everything you've heard about him. He really was that. And playing together was just such a great experience. I mean, I learned a lot. I mean, it really was. It was a very, very wonderful experience. Ronnie knows how to run a tour, and to this day, a lot of the knowledge that I learned on that helps me even with the Foreigner stuff, because a lot of times on the road, Kelly and I are the two guys, the two veterans that, when Mick's not here, we have to be the guys that kind of make sure everything's looking right, and I draw on my Dio experience a lot for that. Yeah,
for sure, and I'm sure Mick is very, very protective about what it is and everything about it, because look, it's his legacy at the end of the day, and it's great to I like that tradition, that rather than it just fade, like he wants to keep the legacy going. Like even when I saw them with Lou, I'm gonna put it late 90s, I'm guessing is around the time, but I may be off on that. But Mick just looked like he was having a blast. But at some point, what is he, 76, 77 now? I mean, at some point, as much as your heart wants to do it, you're just not in the place to do it, Well,
that's not Mick's. Mick is very much in the place to do it. He just he just can't do it all the time, it's really precautionary more than anything else. I mean, he's in great shape, and he's still Mick Jones, so I just think that the real point here is this is a testament to how great the songs are that he and Lou wrote, that it does carry on. And, Foreigner was never a big personality band, in their heyday. So it's not like personalities are associated with the band. It's not like, Tommy Lee and Motley Crue, it's not like that. So it really is down to the music. And I think for a songwriter like Mick Jones, it's got to be the greatest feeling in the world to know that your songs are your legacy and that they carry on regardless. I think that's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and they're in great hands with you and Kelly.
Well, thank you.
Sure. But before we go, I do want to mention a couple other things. So you were part of a project called Black Swan, put out another great album, great choruses again, Jeff. So I want you guys to check that out. It's you, Red Beach, excellent guitar player as well, Robin McCauley. And I checked out the album when I knew you were coming on. I was like, okay, that's one thing I haven't heard yet. So I went back. It's a really good record. Did
you hear the new one or the first one?
No, the one Generation Mind is the one.
Okay, no, that's the new one. Right? Yeah, it just came out.
Really good. So everyone needs to check that out, number one. You also have a project called Heavy Hitters where you and George do covers of songs, which is also great. Like it's
so much fun
to hear some of those songs like Rock Out and In Every Which Way. It's just really, really good, man.
Well, all I can tell you is wait to hear the next one, because we're almost done with it. I think it's going to come out around Christmas, because we actually wrote a Christmas song, George and I. The label asked us, they said, can you either do or write a Christmas song? And we thought, well, what are we going to play, Jingle Bells or something? So we actually wrote a song called It's a Wonderful Life. I realized, wow, there's never been a big Christmas song there's a big Christmas movie called It's a Wonderful Life, but there's never been a song called that. So now there is.
That's very cool. Yeah.
And we've got Bernard Fowler singing, who sings, he sings background for the Rolling Stones, and he was in Charlie Watts's band, and he played with Keith Richards, and amazing singer, wonderful guy. Brian Tishy on drums, who is phenomenal. And we've got Corey Glover singing on one song.
Wow.
And that came out really amazing. But we're doing all sorts of really interesting stuff. Wait till you check out the next record. I'm very, very proud of it. And I'm also excited because, that's what I'm working on right now.
Like all Jeff does is create all the time. So if you guys are just getting to know Jeff from this, then you definitely want to check out his entire catalog of everything he's been a part of, because I really do think you're an incredibly talented person, a very down-to-earth person. So I really want to thank you. I do have something funny to show you before we wrap this up. So I want to tell you a quick story about when I went to see Dokken open for Judas Priest. I was very big on the fact that I wanted to get some pictures. So back in the day, we had these Instamatics. You remember, it was a disc camera. It was like an actual disc of film that you would put in the camera. And they were terrible. They took terrible, terrible photos. And we're sitting in like the 200-300s. It's not like we're sitting close enough where I'm going to. But in my head, I want to get pictures. We don't have time to get film. So I smuggle in a camera with one shot. So I tell my friend Rob, I say, Rob, when the time comes, I'm going to tap on you. You turn around, and I'm going to take the photo with the band in the background. So we did, and this is how it came out. This is you, Jeff. Nowhere. It's just his head. So this.
Wow.
You were in the building somewhere, somewhere in there.
Well, that would have been probably spring of '86, I'm guessing. If we were out with Priest on the tour boat tour, and you said Nassau Coliseum,
Yep. That sounds about right. What was it like the first time you played your first arena? Do you remember where it was and like what that?
Absolutely, I do. Well, the first arena I had actually done an arena when I played with a guy by the name of Randy Hansen before that, up in Northern California. But my first show with Dokken was at the Dallas Convention Center, I think it was called, December 7th, 1983. I remember that.
I remember.
Anyway, and it was really a great experience in that it was so exciting to play an arena, but we knew nothing about it. And so I will never forget this as long as I live. We didn't get a sound check with the PA like a band usually does. But what they did was they said, well, okay, before we open the doors, you guys can go in and you guys can go, dial in your amps.
Oh, boy.
And like, okay, well, we're in an arena. I've never played an arena before. I didn't realize that the PA wasn't on. So when I went in there, I wanted the bass to sound like it was filling up the room. But the PA, mind you, the PA wasn't on. And so did George. George set his guitar, like, okay, that sounds pretty good, Oh, no. So when we went out and hit the first note with the PA on, I just about fell over. It was so incredibly loud. It was like being hit by a sonic boom or something. It was
it's so funny. Those people, when you see those walls of amps, none of them are on. Like
right?
Yeah, usually you just have one or two amps that are mic'd behind the scenes. So I just this image of you guys cranking everything up to fill the arena.
Loud enough to fill an arena without the PA on. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, and blow a couple of microphones, I'm sure, in the process as well.
Maybe.
Yeah, well, Jeff, I really want to thank you once again for joining us. It was really a pleasure having you, and thank you so much for the decades of great music. Thank you so much.
That coffee worked.
Yeah, thank God.
I know you're tired. Thank you so much for spending.
No, actually, I'm okay now. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks,
it was really great. Really great.
Have a great show tonight.
Take care. Thank you. Talk to you guys soon.
Thank you for watching The Whole AM Rob Sprance.
I'm Lori Levine.
Later, motherfuckers.